Samantha awoke to the sound of cheers and applause, a cacophony of voices shouting, "Surprise!" Her vision blurred as she took in the scene. Balloons, streamers, and a banner strung across the room that read, "Happy Birthday, Samantha." Her best friend Lisa rushed over and hugged her tightly. "You're finally here. We've been planning this for weeks." Samantha smiled weakly, disoriented. She didn't remember planning a party or even telling anyone she wanted one. She scanned the room, spotting familiar faces. Her parents, co-workers, and old school friends she hadn't seen in years. They were all smiling, too broadly, but she chalked it up to being caught off guard. The atmosphere felt warm, almost too perfect, like a scene out of a movie. Everyone was laughing, the music was cheerful, and the scent of cake and candles filled the air. But as she wandered through the room, unease began to creep in. Her father, who hated crowds, stood stiffly in the corner, his expression vacant. The birthday cake had her name misspelled as Samantha. When she pointed it out to Lisa, her friend just giggled. "Don't be silly, it's perfect." Lisa's laugh, Samantha noticed, echoed unnaturally, like it was looping over itself. Then there was the shadow. In the far corner of the room, just beyond the reach of the party lights, a tall, unmoving figure stood watching. Samantha squinted, but every time she tried to focus, someone would step into her line of sight. The oddities began to pile up, balloons deflating the moment she walked past, whispers coming from empty corners, and her mother, who hadn't said a word, silently holding a drink that never seemed to spill. When it was time to blow out the candles, everyone crowded around her. The shadowy figure was closer now, still lurking at the edge of the room. "Make a wish," Lisa said. Her grin stretched unnaturally wide. Samantha hesitated, but under the weight of their expectant stares, she blew out the candles. The lights went out. Darkness swallowed the room, and for a moment, there was only silence. Then she heard it, whispers, low and rhythmic, growing louder until they formed a chant. She jolted awake to the same shout. "Surprise!" Everything was reset. The same decorations, the same people, the same distorted version of her name on the cake. But now, the flaws were more pronounced. The guests' smiles seemed plastered on, their eyes glassy and unfocused. Her father was gone, replaced by an empty chair. Panic set in as Samantha realized something was wrong. She grabbed Lisa by the arm. "What's happening? Why am I here again?" Lisa's head tilted unnaturally to the side, her grin splitting wider. "It's your party, silly. Aren't you having fun?" Samantha tried to leave, but the door wouldn't open. The windows showed only an endless void. She ran to the kitchen only to find it eerily empty. A single photograph sat on the counter, showing her at the party. But in the photo, she looked terrified, her face frozen in a silent scream. The loops continued. Each time she blew out the candles, the party reset, but the changes grew more disturbing. The balloons sagged, the cake began to rot, and the guests became less human. Their movements were jerky, their laughter warped. Her mother's face was hollow, her eyes sunken. By the fifth loop, Samantha stopped blowing out the candles, desperate to break the cycle. But the party reset anyway, the shadowy figure now standing directly behind her. "You can't leave," it whispered, its voice like 1,000 echoes. Desperate for answers, Samantha searched the house. In the attic, she found a journal belonging to someone named Evelyn. The entries spoke of an endless party, a host trapped forever, and a shadow that fed on despair. The final entry read, "Don't trust the candles. They hold the key, but the cost is steep." Samantha confronted Lisa. "Why am I here? What are you?" Lisa's face twisted, her features melting into something monstrous. "You're the guest of honor, Samantha. The party doesn't end until we say so." Realizing the candles were the key, Samantha knew she had to destroy them. In the next loop, as the guests gathered around her, she grabbed the cake and smashed it to the ground, stomping out the flames. The room erupted into chaos. The guests screamed, their faces melting and twisting. The shadow lunged at her, its featureless head inches from hers. "You can't escape!" it hissed, its voice a deafening roar. With a final act of defiance, Samantha grabbed a piece of the shattered cake and hurled it into the shadow's center. It recoiled, howling as the room began to collapse into darkness. Samantha woke up in her bed, heart racing. Her phone buzzed with a message from Lisa. "Can't wait to see you tonight for your birthday dinner." As she stared at the screen, the faint sound of a distant chorus reached her ears. Surprise. Ray, a seasoned truck driver with thousands of miles behind him, was on the tail end of a grueling haul through the desert. His rig's fuel gauge edged perilously close to empty. The endless stretch of highway ahead offered no signs of civilization. Just as panic started to creep in, a flicker of neon caught his eye. Last stop fuel, open 24 hours. The station sat alone in the vast emptiness, a crumbling relic of another era. Its sign buzzed faintly, casting sporadic flashes of light. A single pump stood crookedly under a dim bulb, and the peeling paint on the wooden shopfront hinted at decades of neglect. As Ray pulled in, he spotted a man leaning against the doorway, his shadow cast long and distorted under the overhead light. The man stepped forward, his smile unnervingly wide and unwavering. "Welcome, friend," he called out, his voice oddly high-pitched and strained. "Looks like you're running on fumes." Ray hesitated, unease prickling his skin. He rolled down his window slightly. "Yeah, just need to fill up. Got a long drive ahead." "No problem at all." The attendant's grin didn't falter. He gestured toward the pump. "We'll take care of you." Ray parked and stepped out. The silence was oppressive, broken only by the faint hum of insects in the distance. As he approached the pump, he glanced toward the shop. The faint light inside revealed a cluttered interior, but something on the walls caught his eye. Rows upon rows of Polaroid photos. Each one showed a trucker standing next to their rig, grinning ear to ear. The photos were faded, and the dates beneath them spanned decades. A chill crept up Ray's spine. "What's with the pictures?" he asked, trying to keep his voice steady. "Just a little tradition," the attendant replied, now standing unnervingly close. "We'd like to remember our visitors." Ray didn't respond. He turned back to his truck, uneasy under the man's watchful gaze. As he pumped the gas, he caught movement from the corner of his eye. In the shop window, another figure stood, obscured by shadows. Its outline was human, but something about the proportions was wrong. Too tall, arms too long. When Ray blinked, the figure was gone. His hands trembled as he replaced the pump nozzle. He climbed back into the cab and turned the key. The engine sputtered but refused to start. "Need some help?" The attendant was suddenly at the driver's side window, his grin impossibly wider, teeth gleaming under the flickering light. "No, thanks," Ray said hastily, his voice cracking. He tried the ignition again, but the truck remained lifeless. He glanced at his phone. No signal. The air felt heavier. Shadows seemed to shift and writhe in the periphery of the station's weak light. Ray's breath quickened as he looked back toward the shop. The Polaroids on the wall. He could have sworn there were more now, and one of them looked just like him. A soft, rhythmic tapping drew his attention back to the window. The attendant stared at him, his dead, glassy eyes unblinking. "Maybe you'd like to come inside. Use the phone?" Ray shook his head, sweat beading on his brow. "I'm good." But as he tried the ignition one last time, a sound like distant laughter echoed through the desert. It grew louder, closer, until it surrounded him. Turning, Ray saw figures emerging from the darkness, their silhouettes faintly glowing. They moved in unison, each bearing the same grotesque, stretched smile as the attendant. Ray's instincts screamed at him to run. He shoved the door open and bolted toward the highway, his boots kicking up dust as he sprinted into the void. Behind him, the laughter turned to a low, guttural chant, growing louder with every step. The distant glow of headlights appeared ahead. Ray waved frantically, shouting for help. A massive truck barreled toward him, horn blaring. Relief turned to terror as he saw the driver's face. An identical grin stretched across it, eyes hollow and lifeless. The truck swerved at the last moment, disappearing into the darkness. But when Ray looked down, he saw his reflection in the windshield of his own rig, still parked at the station. The reflection smiled back, wide and gleaming. His legs gave out. When he hit the ground, the world went dark. The next morning, the station buzzed to life under the rising sun. The last stop fuel sign flickered as usual. Inside the shop, a new Polaroid had been added to the wall. Ray, standing by his truck, his grin frozen in time, joining the countless other regulars who had stopped there before. Sophomore Jessica Brooks had always been a creature of habit. Every morning at 8 a.m., she would walk from her dorm to the campus coffee shop, a steaming cup of latte in hand as she made her way through the early morning bustle. Nothing out of the ordinary ever happened. That was until she noticed the figure. At first, she thought it was a trick of the light. On her walk to class, she began to notice a person standing on the edge of campus, near the trees by the old library. The figure was always there, standing completely still, wearing a plain white mask. It wasn't an elaborate mask, just smooth, expressionless, and unnervingly featureless. They never moved. They didn't approach her. They didn't speak. But every day, without fail, the figure stood at the same spot, staring directly at her. At first, Jessica tried to brush it off as a prank or some eccentric art student. But as the days passed, she couldn't shake the unsettling feeling that someone was watching her. The mask was always the same, silent, cold, unblinking. One evening, after finishing her studies, Jessica returned to her dorm to find a small envelope slipped under her door. She opened it to find a photo of herself, taken from behind the mask, smiling as she walked across campus. It was a picture she recognized. She had taken it the previous week when she was leaving class. The eerie part wasn't the photo itself, but the fact that someone had been close enough to take it. The next day, another photo arrived, this time showing her in the coffee shop, a latte in hand. The mask was drawn on her face. The pencil lines were crude, as if the stalker was too eager to finish the drawing, but it was unmistakably her. She stared at it for a long time, the weight of dread sinking into her chest. Who could be doing this? She told her roommates about it, but they all dismissed it as a weird prank. College students loved to play strange jokes on each other, but Jessica couldn't shake the feeling of being hunted. Then the gifts started arriving. Each morning she would find something new in her dorm room, an old doll with its eyes scratched out, a single red rose lying on her pillow, a locked box with a note saying, "Let me in." But the most chilling part was that her door was always locked when she left, and nothing seemed to be disturbed. No one could have entered without a key, and she always kept it secured. Frantic, Jessica installed a camera in her room, hoping to catch the person responsible. But when she checked the footage, there was no one in the room. The camera, though, had captured something even more disturbing, a faint shadow lingering near the door, just outside her line of sight. The figure in the mask was standing in the hallway, motionless, waiting. One night, unable to sleep, Jessica decided to confront the figure. She walked through campus after midnight, heart racing with every step, making her way to the spot where she had seen the masked person every day. There, standing under a street lamp, was the figure once again. "Why are you doing this?" Jessica called out, her voice trembling. "Who are you?" The figure didn't respond. It just stood there, silent as always. Then, suddenly, something clicked in Jessica's mind. The figure's posture, the way it stood motionless, but with a certain intensity. She'd seen it before. It was a memory, one that had been buried deep for years, locked away, forgotten. A long time ago, when she was a child, she had a neighbor, a boy who lived next door. He had always been strange, quiet, and obsessed with masks. He would always wear one around her, and his favorite game was to stand perfectly still, watching her without speaking. One night, after she had played with him, something went wrong. She couldn't remember the details, but the boy had vanished, and the police never found him. The memories of that night were fuzzy. She'd blocked them out after her parents moved away. But now, in the dim light of the campus, the pieces of the puzzle fell into place. The stalker wasn't just some random figure. It was him, the boy from her childhood, the one who had disappeared after the incident. He hadn't forgotten her, and he hadn't forgiven her. The boy she had once known had come back for revenge, and now he was haunting her, trying to make her remember what she had done. In a wave of panic, Jessica backed away, but the figure moved toward her, its head slowly tilting, as if studying her. The mask was blank, but somehow she could feel the malice behind it. The boy had been twisted by whatever happened to him, and now she was his obsession. Jessica turned and ran, her breath coming in short gasps as she fled back to her dorm. When she burst through the door, she found a new gift waiting for her. A photo of her, younger, standing next to the boy in the mask, with the words written underneath, "You made me this way." And beneath the photo, in tiny, blood-red letters, "Now it's your turn."